Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. A YouTuber I admire called Smudboy gave me this interactive story by CloudRunner Studios called Melancholy Republic, so I could review it for him. And that is what I am going to be doing in this video. Now allow me to get this out of the way first. Do not be fooled into thinking Melancholy Republic is a game because of the fact you can buy it on Steam for $6.99. It isn't a game in my view. There is no failure state or victory state. It is a linear tale from beginning to end. And unless there is a secret ending, which you can find by speaking to all the NPCs, which I am sure I did, or putting in a code somewhere, there is only one ending. It also cannot be called an RPG because there are no role-playing elements. There are two sections where you choose the character's responses to a situation, but they do not create different plot lines or change how the story plays out. I just thought that I would make that clear before actually reviewing this interactive story, which is about the fantasy city-state of Lorna, home to a dysfunctional republic. You follow the tale of a senator called Claire Lockridge, who has gone to Lorna to replace her father who was murdered under mysterious circumstances. It will be your mission to discover who murdered your father, and to expose the corruption infecting this republic. Now, I shall start the review by sharing how I felt while progressing in the story before talking about some specifics. In my view, Melancholy Republic can be split into two parts. The first part I did not enjoy at all. I had to force myself to continue. I didn't care about the main character. I didn't care about her goals. I didn't care much for the political and philosophical lecturing that was thrown at me. And I cared very little for the strawmanning of people and positions, which the developers clearly didn't think much of. Then part 2 happened, and suddenly it felt very personal. I wanted to destroy the villain in this tale. I wanted to bring him to justice, and was fully engaged with the story. However, the transition from part 1 to part 2 was very dark, and I shall discuss it a bit later in this review. So let us discuss part 1 in more detail. Part 1 of Melancholy Republic is a bright and happy tale with admittedly dark undertones, but nothing too intense. The story is filled with one-sided political lecturing on contentious issues, the issues being refugees and poverty. The opposite points of view in the story are represented by strawmen, and the fact that Claire cannot help herself but start lecturing somebody every 20 minutes makes her dislikable as a protagonist. Fortunately, the other characters in the story are likable, and definitely more interesting than Claire. Unfortunately, 3 of them serve no plot function, and are just there for banter and comic relief. Only 2 of the characters actually serve the plot, and have character arcs, and only one of them has a sympathetic backstory which develops their character. For the most part, nothing happens in part 1 either. Claire has some interesting conversations and interactions with a couple of other characters, but otherwise it all feels like setup for something bigger. Which brings us to part 2. There is one scene in between part 1 and part 2 where a significant plot reveal happens and acts as the bridge from part 1 to part 2. Now, the reveal in this scene was so disturbing, sickening, and dark that for days I felt ill whenever I thought about continuing with the story. I am not exaggerating. Nevertheless, after a few emergency cognitive therapy sessions with the Royal Imperial Counsellor, I got back into the story so I could finish this review. After this point, the direction of the story becomes clear and the plot is imbued with purpose. The story, as a result of that reveal, turns darker as well, and the rest of the comedy acts like a plaster, patched onto a large flesh wound. Too little too late, the damage had already been done by this point, and greater measures would have to be taken to restore the original tone. Curiously, the second part of Melancholy Republic helps to justify the existence of some of the political and philosophical lecturing in the first part, by questioning one of the premises of Claire's philosophy, and never providing a concrete answer, a bit like the ending of the book The Fault in Our Stars. I am unsure whether this was to leave the audience with questions, or because the writers didn't know what they were doing. I am tempted to conclude it was the latter, however, because the game is amateurish in some of the conversations. Some of the dialogue feels off. I cannot imagine a world where an aristocrat and a street urchin would have the same dialect, vocabulary, manners, mode of address, and both use the exclamation "yeesh" while in polite company. Some of the conversations between multiple people feel forced, as if the writers were trying too hard to make the exchanges amusing and witty. The interactive nature of the world within the story is rather limited. All the NPCs I approached would say something if I clicked the enter key. There were also some very unprofessional history books you could read, and there were some statues and paintings you could have Claire comment on, but it wasn't clear what you could interact with and what you couldn't. I ended up trying to interact with anything and everything, desperate to discover extra information about the world and the institutions within it. However, one aspect of this interactive fable is great. The music is brilliant. Throughout my 6 hours, some of the music did get a little repetitive, but I never tired of it. The menu music is excellent. The track that plays while walking throughout most of the story is bright and cheerful. And this piece sounds like something from a James Bond film if James Bond films were more jovial. If the developers start selling the music of this story, I will probably buy all the tracks. Interestingly, this part of this track reminded me of this song.
To hold me and to hide me.
Then say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Let me lead you from your solitude.
And no, I did not hum the tune softly or sing any of the verses of that song while progressing through the story. Since we are in close proximity to the subject, there are 2 romantic subplots in the story. One of them is alright as far as romance is concerned, but it is a bit short. However, it is deliberately short. The second I didn't appreciate. I don't like sodomitical romances in any form of art. The only positive thing I can say about it is that it wasn't used as a soapbox to preach to or insult people like me who are opposed to that sort of thing. 2 characters of the same sex are just sexually attracted to each other and act on their urges. Nothing more, nothing less. It is treated like a heterosexual romance in that regard. The developers and writers don't seem to have been trying to make a statement. So without spoiling anything, that is all I have to say about Melancholy Republic. But can I recommend it? This is a difficult question for me to answer, but knowing what I know about the story now, I certainly wouldn't spend £6 on it. I might buy it for 99p, but I definitely cannot recommend the story at its current price. While filled with interesting ideas, some likeable characters, and an intriguing setting, the execution of the concepts and facets of the story isn't the most skilled. I didn't particularly enjoy myself while progressing through the story, and even though some interesting questions of a philosophical nature are raised towards the end of the experience, I don't think it mitigates all the other problems in the story to a great enough degree. In short, I cannot recommend this story to anyone. Although I would hesitate to call the story bad or terrible, I would hardly call it good. And I believe that is all I have to say on the subject. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day. And both use the exclamation geese, geese, geese. And both use the exclamation geesh, geese, geesh, geesh. And both use the exclamation geesh while in polite company.